It was supposed to be a routine night shift in the maternity ward until I saw Dr. Stevens wheeling two babies out of the nursery at 3 a.m. He claimed he was taking them for special tests, but no tests were scheduled. When I followed him, I witnessed something that would destroy multiple families and expose the most shocking betrayal in our hospital's history. My name is Tamara Williams, and I've been a maternity nurse at Sacred Heart Medical Center for 12 years. In that time, I've helped deliver over 2,000 babies, witnessed countless moments of pure joy as families welcomed new life, and comforted parents through the most vulnerable moments of their lives. I thought I understood the sacred trust that exists between families and the medical professionals who help bring their children into the world. I was wrong. What I discovered that Tuesday night shattered everything I believed about the safety and sanctity of our maternity ward and revealed a conspiracy so twisted that it haunted me for years afterward. This is the story of how one suspicious observation led to the exposure of a baby trafficking operation that had been stealing newborns and destroying families for over 3 years, all orchestrated by a doctor I had trusted and respected. The maternity ward at Sacred Heart Medical Center operates on a different rhythm during night shifts. The chaos of daytime deliveries gives way to peaceful monitoring of new mothers and their babies, feeding schedules, and the gentle care that helps families bond during their first precious hours together. Tuesday night started routinely. I had 8 mothers under my care. 3 had delivered earlier that day, 2 were first-time mothers still adjusting to motherhood, and 3 were experienced mothers who knew the routine. All the babies were healthy, all the mothers were recovering well, and the ward hummed with the quiet efficiency of seasoned night staff. Dr. Richard Stevens was the attending obstetrician on duty. At 52, he was one of our most respected physicians, with a reputation for excellent patient care and a gentle bedside manner that made anxious mothers feel safe. I'd worked with Dr. Stevens for 8 years, and he'd always been professional, competent, and genuinely caring toward both mothers and babies. Around 11 p.m., I was checking on baby Charlotte Martinez, born 6 hours earlier to Maria and Carlos Martinez, a young couple from the south side of town. Charlotte was a beautiful baby with dark hair and the peaceful expression that newborns have when they're completely content. "She's perfect," Maria whispered as I checked Charlotte's vitals. "I can't believe she's really ours." "She's absolutely beautiful," I agreed, updating Charlotte's chart. "Are you planning to breastfeed?" We discussed feeding schedules and post-delivery care while Carlos dozed in the chair beside Maria's bed. It was the kind of quiet, intimate moment that made maternity nursing so rewarding, helping a family navigate their first hours together. At the same time, in room 12, another mother was experiencing a very different kind of delivery. Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, 45 years old, had just given birth to her first child after years of fertility treatments. Her husband, James Whitman, was a prominent attorney, and they'd spared no expense in their efforts to have a child. Baby Whitman was born with complications that required monitoring in our NICU, but by midnight, he was stable and ready to return to his parents' room. Everything seemed normal. 2 healthy babies, 2 happy families, another successful night in our maternity ward. I had no idea that Dr. Stevens was about to destroy both families' lives. At 2:30 a.m., I was updating medication charts when Dr. Stevens approached me with an unusual request. "Tamara, I need to take baby Martinez and baby Whitman for some additional testing. There were some irregularities in their blood work that need immediate follow-up." I checked my charts. "Doctor, I don't see any orders for additional blood work. Both babies' initial tests came back normal." Dr. Stevens looked slightly annoyed. I just ordered the tests. The lab called with some concerns about genetic markers that need verification. I want to handle this personally to avoid alarming the families unnecessarily. Something about his explanation felt off. In 12 years of maternity nursing, I'd never seen a doctor personally transport babies for blood work in the middle of the night. Lab technicians typically came to the ward, or if transport was necessary, it was handled by nursing staff with proper documentation. "Should I prepare transport paperwork?" I asked. "No, this is urgent. I'll handle the documentation afterward. Just help me get the babies ready for transport." Dr. Stevens was already moving toward the nursery, where both babies were sleeping peacefully in their bassinets. His sense of urgency seemed forced, and his reluctance to follow normal procedures was troubling. "Doctor, hospital policy requires that parents be notified before any additional testing." "Tamara," he interrupted, his voice carrying an edge I'd never heard before. "I'm handling this situation. Please don't wake the parents unnecessarily. This is likely nothing, and I don't want to cause panic over routine follow-up tests." Against my better judgment, I helped Dr. Stevens prepare both babies for transport. But as he wheeled them out of the nursery on separate gurneys, every instinct I'd developed as a nurse was telling me something was wrong. No tests were scheduled, no lab technicians were waiting, and Dr. Stevens was taking both babies in the same direction, toward the hospital's administrative wing, not toward the laboratory. I made a decision that would change everything. I followed him. Dr. Stevens moved quickly through the hospital corridors, clearly familiar with routes that would avoid security cameras and night staff. I followed at a distance, using my knowledge of the hospital's layout to stay out of sight while keeping the gurneys in view. Instead of heading to the laboratory or any testing facility, Dr. Stevens took the elevator to the hospital's administrative level. This floor was largely empty at night, used primarily for business offices and storage areas that had no connection to patient care. I took the stairs to avoid being seen in the elevator, arriving at the administrative level just in time to see Dr. Stevens entering a conference room at the end of the corridor. Through the glass walls, I could see him positioning the two gurneys side by side. What happened next made my blood run cold. Dr. Stevens began switching the identification bracelets on both babies. Baby Martinez's bracelet went onto baby Whitman, and baby Whitman's bracelet went onto baby Martinez. He was deliberately switching the babies' identities. I watched in horror as he then switched their hospital charts, medical records, and even their blankets, ensuring that every form of identification was completely reversed. When he was finished, the baby who belonged to Maria and Carlos Martinez would be going home with Eleanor and James Whitman, and the baby who belonged to the Whitmans would be going home with the Martinez family. But Dr. Stevens wasn't finished. He pulled out his cell phone and made a call. "It's done," he said quietly. "The Whitman baby is now listed as Martinez, and the Martinez baby is listed as Whitman. The transfer will happen during morning discharge procedures, just as we discussed. Transfer." This wasn't a mistake or a moment of confusion. This was a planned operation with someone else involved. "Yes, the payment better be ready. This is getting riskier each time, and I want out after this one." Dr. Stevens listened to the response. "No, the families will never know. By the time they discover any discrepancies, if they ever do, it will be too late to prove anything." I realized I was witnessing something far worse than a simple baby switch. This was an organized operation, and Dr. Stevens was being paid to steal babies from families and give them to others. Still hidden in the stairwell, I used my phone to record Dr. Stevens as he completed the baby switch and made arrangements for what appeared to be a coordinated deception involving multiple people. "The adoption agency will handle the legal paperwork retroactively." He continued his phone conversation. As far as official records will show, the Whitmans' biological child died during delivery, and they adopted the Martinez baby through legitimate channels. The Martinez family will never know their biological child is alive. The scope of the conspiracy became clear. Dr. Stevens wasn't just switching babies, he was working with a corrupt adoption agency to steal children from poor families and sell them to wealthy couples who couldn't adopt through legal means. The Martinez family would believe their baby died if complications arose, or they would raise a child that wasn't biologically theirs, never knowing their real child was living with another family. The Whitmans would receive a baby they thought was legally adopted, unaware that it had been stolen from its biological parents. "How many more times?" Dr. Stevens asked his contact. "I told you I want out of this business. The risk is getting too high, and I can't keep finding ways to explain infant complications and deaths." Infant deaths. My stomach churned as I realized that Dr. Stevens had been using his position to fake infant deaths when baby switches were necessary, telling grieving families their children had died when they'd actually been sold to other families. Fine, 2 more operations, then I'm done. But I want double the usual payment for each one. This level of risk demands compensation. Dr. Stevens ended his call and began wheeling the babies back toward the maternity ward. I quickly made my way back through the stairwell, reaching the nursery before he returned. When Dr. Stevens arrived with the babies, everything about their appearance was identical to how they'd left. Same blankets, same positioning, same peaceful sleeping expressions. If I hadn't witnessed the switch, I would never have known that both families' lives had just been destroyed by a systematic deception. "How did the testing go?" I asked, trying to keep my voice normal. "Everything looked fine. False alarm. Both babies are healthy and ready to go home with their families in the morning." The casual way he lied about what he'd just done was perhaps more chilling than the act itself. Dr. Stevens had been doing this long enough that deception came naturally to him. The rest of my shift passed in a haze of shock and determination. I continued my normal duties while trying to process what I'd witnessed and decide how to respond to such an elaborate conspiracy. By morning, I'd made my decision. I needed evidence that would stand up in court and expose not just Dr. Stevens, but the entire operation he was working with. During my lunch break, I used the hospital's computer system to research recent cases involving Dr. Stevens' patients. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Over the past 3 years, Dr. Stevens had been involved in an unusually high number of cases involving infant deaths, failed adoptions, and complicated delivery situations. The pattern was subtle but clear once I knew what to look for. Poor families often experienced tragic complications that resulted in infant death or required babies to be transferred to specialized care facilities. Wealthy families who'd struggled with fertility often received babies through last-minute adoption opportunities that Dr. Stevens had facilitated. The timing was always perfect. When a wealthy couple needed a baby, a poor family would experience a medical emergency that separated them from their child. I also discovered that Dr. Stevens had financial connections to Blessed Beginnings Adoption Agency, a private organization that specialized in emergency placements and compassionate adoptions for wealthy families. But I needed more than circumstantial evidence. I needed proof of the conspiracy that would be impossible to deny or explain away. I decided to set a trap for Dr. Stevens that would force him to reveal the scope of his operation while I recorded evidence. The opportunity came the following week when Maria Martinez brought baby Charlotte back to the hospital for a routine follow-up appointment. During the visit, Maria expressed concerns that had been growing since she'd taken the baby home. Nurse Tamara, I know this sounds crazy, but I keep feeling like something's wrong. Charlotte doesn't look like me or Carlos, and she has blue eyes, but both Carlos and I have brown eyes. Is that possible? I knew that Maria was right to be concerned. The baby she was raising wasn't biologically hers. But I also knew that doctor. Stevens would try to dismiss her concerns with medical explanations that would prevent her from investigating further. Let me have doctor. Stevens examine Charlotte and address your concerns, I suggested. He delivered her so he can explain any genetic questions you might have. When Dr. Stevens arrived for the appointment, I made sure to be present for the consultation while secretly recording the conversation on my phone. Mrs. Martinez, Dr. Stevens said in his most reassuring voice, eye colour can be unpredictable in newborns. Sometimes babies are born with blue eyes that change to brown over several months, and facial features can take time to develop into recognisable family resemblances. But she doesn't act like I expected either. She's so quiet and calm, not fussy like Carlos was as a baby. Every baby has their own personality, Mrs. Martinez. You shouldn't worry about Charlotte not matching your expectations. She's a healthy, beautiful baby, and that's what matters most. Dr. Stevens was systematically dismissing every legitimate concern Maria had about the baby that wasn't biologically hers. His explanations were plausible enough to prevent most parents from pursuing genetic testing or other verification. What about DNA testing? Maria asked. Could we do that just to put my mind at ease? Dr. Stevens's expression hardened slightly. Mrs. Martinez, I have to ask why you would doubt that Charlotte is your biological child. Are you suggesting that something inappropriate happened during your delivery? The implied threat was clear. If Maria pursued DNA testing, Dr. Stevens would position it as an accusation against the hospital and medical staff. No, of course not. I keep having this feeling. Maternal anxiety is very common after delivery. I'd recommend speaking with a counsellor if these doubts continue to trouble you. Charlotte is definitely your biological child, and continued uncertainty could interfere with your bonding process. I watched Dr. Stevens manipulate a mother's legitimate concerns into self-doubt and guilt. He was using his medical authority to prevent Maria from discovering that her biological child had been stolen. That evening, I called Maria Martinez and arranged to meet her away from the hospital. I couldn't allow her to continue raising a child that wasn't hers, while her biological child was living with another family. Maria, I need to tell you something that's going to be very difficult to hear. The baby you brought home from the hospital isn't your biological child. Maria stared at me in shock. What do you mean? How is that possible? I explained what I'd witnessed during the night shift, showing her the video evidence I'd recorded of Dr. Stevens, switching the baby's identification bracelets. You're telling me that my real baby is with another family? Yes, and the baby you've been caring for belongs to a family named Whitman who believe they adopted her legally. Maria began crying as the full impact of the situation hit her. How many other families has this happened to? I believe, Doctor. Stevens has been doing this for years, working with an adoption agency to steal babies from families like yours and sell them to wealthy couples who can't adopt through legal channels. We discussed options for exposing Dr. Stevens while protecting both affected families. Maria agreed to cooperate with law enforcement to gather additional evidence, but she also insisted on immediate DNA testing to confirm what I'd told her. The DNA results confirmed our worst fears. The baby Maria had been raising for 2 weeks wasn't biologically related to her or Carlos. Somewhere in the city, their real daughter was living with strangers who believed they'd legally adopted her. Armed with video evidence, DNA test results, and Maria's testimony, I contacted the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit. The case was assigned to Special Agent Sarah Chen, who specialized in child trafficking and illegal adoption schemes. Ms. Williams, what you're describing is one of the most sophisticated baby trafficking operations we've encountered. If Dr. Stevens has been doing this for years, we could be looking at dozens of affected families. Agent Chen developed a plan to gather additional evidence before arresting Dr. Stevens. She arranged for undercover agents to pose as a wealthy couple seeking a baby through illegal channels, using contacts that led back to Blessed Beginnings Adoption Agency. The undercover operation confirmed that Dr. Stevens was indeed working with the adoption agency to provide babies for couples willing to pay premium prices for no questions asked adoptions. Dr. Stevens is the key to the entire operation, Agent Chen explained. He identifies suitable targets among his patients, arranges the switches, and provides medical documentation that supports whatever story the adoption agency needs. The plan was to catch Dr. Stevens in the act of arranging another baby switch while recording evidence that would expose the entire network. The operation culminated 2 weeks later when Dr. Stevens attempted to arrange another baby switch involving twins born to a teenage mother and a wealthy couple who'd been trying to adopt for years. I was working the night shift when Dr. Stevens approached me with his familiar story about urgent testing needed for the newborn twins. This time, however, FBI agents were monitoring the situation from hidden positions throughout the hospital. Tamara, I need to transport these babies for genetic testing. There are some concerns about potential complications that need immediate evaluation. Of course, doctor. Should I prepare the parents for potential bad news? Let's wait until we have more information. No need to alarm them unnecessarily. As Dr. Stevens wheeled the babies toward the administrative wing, FBI agents moved into position. They arrested him in the conference room where he'd switched so many babies over the years, catching him in the act of changing identification bracelets. The evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Stevens' phone contained communications with adoption agency coordinators, payment records showing hundreds of thousands of dollars in illegal fees, and detailed plans for future baby trafficking operations. The investigation revealed that Dr. Stevens had been stealing and selling babies for over 5 years, affecting at least 23 families. Some children had been switched at birth, like Maria's daughter, while others had been declared dead when they were actually sold to adoptive families. The most heartbreaking cases involved families who'd grieved for children they believed had died, when those children were actually alive and living with families who'd unknowingly participated in their trafficking. Maria Martinez was reunited with her biological daughter after DNA testing confirmed the baby's identity. The Whitman family, devastated to learn that their adopted child had been stolen, cooperated fully with authorities and supported Maria's family during the transition. "We had no idea," Eleanor Whitman said during Dr. Stevens' trial. "We thought we were giving a home to a child who needed one. We never imagined we were participating in kidnapping." Dr. Stevens was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison for child trafficking, fraud, and conspiracy. Blessed Beginnings Adoption Agency was shut down, and several of its employees received prison sentences for their roles in the conspiracy. The hospital implemented new protocols for newborn identification and monitoring, including DNA verification for any baby requiring extended medical care and mandatory dual verification for all infant transports. 3 years later, I still work in the maternity ward at Sacred Heart Medical Center, but everything about the job feels different now. The trust that families place in us feels more precious and more fragile, knowing how easily it can be violated by someone in a position of authority. Maria Martinez and her daughter have built a strong relationship, though Maria says the first few months were challenging as they learned to bond after being separated during the critical early weeks. "I look at her now and I can't imagine my life without her," Maria told me during a recent visit. "But I also can't forget that there are other families out there who might still be missing their children because of what Dr. Stevens did." The case led to federal legislation requiring DNA verification for all newborns in cases involving medical complications, adoptions, or extended hospital stays. It also established a national database for tracking infant medical records that makes it much harder for traffickers to manipulate documentation. For me, the doctor, Stephen's case reinforced the importance of trusting professional instincts even when they lead to uncomfortable confrontations with colleagues. The unusual request, the deviation from protocol, the reluctance to follow proper documentation, all were warning signs that something was wrong. But perhaps the most important lesson was about the vulnerability of the families we serve. Parents trust us with their most precious possessions, their children, and that trust creates opportunities for both healing and harm. Dr. Stevens used his position as a healer to become a predator, exploiting the vulnerability of new parents for financial gain. But his downfall came because other medical professionals refused to ignore the signs that something was wrong. Sometimes the most important nursing skill isn't medical knowledge or technical competence. Sometimes it's the courage to question authority when patients' safety and families' integrity are at stake. Because when someone violates the sacred trust between medical professionals and the families we serve, it's our responsibility to speak up, investigate, and protect the innocent, even when the predator is wearing a white coat.